What's going on, boys? Smelly Jelly here, and this isn't necessarily a post-watch reaction as I saw Evil Dead Rise for the second time last weekend, but we're here today to talk about Evil Dead Rise. I think right off the bat, me saying how I saw it the second time last weekend should tell you how I feel about it. I really enjoyed this movie. I remember first watching the trailers, I was a little nervous, a little skeptical about it, and just how far off they might get, far off the beaten path they might get from being an Evil Dead movie. I thought they were going to go into the, dare I say, the routes of just being a kind of generic supernatural movie with a little bit of gore in it. It's safe to say, though, that when I remember opening night, so this was 2 weekends ago, I was there with my little brother, and I just remember the intro sequence followed into the title card drop. I was like, oh yeah, my expectations are about to be swept away. They know what they're doing. I'm gonna just let them do their thing, and they delivered. It's Evil Dead Rise. It feels like it's a, they know they're making a movie for the newer generation of horror fans, but at its core and like kind of stylistically, it still feels like an Evil Dead movie. With of course they have like the Evil Dead cam, and the way that Deadites are portrayed in this movie, they still have that in this movie. What we expect from the Evil Dead movies, but there are some other things that are fresh and new that haven't been done before in this franchise that, again, stylistically, aesthetically, feel Evil Dead, to me at least. I think an example right off the bat, and this one was very striking to me and I really liked it, was there were a couple shots and scenes where characters would be like looking up at like a bird's eye shot, and I was like, oh, that's a new angle, a new camera shot in this franchise, but it felt like it belonged in an Evil Dead movie. Stuff like that. They know the franchise and they kind of delivered on that note. Another thing that's core to Evil Dead is the emphasis on practical effects and being as bombastic as possible with displaying those practical effects. I was nervous just because it's the 2020s. It's, there's that constant kind of balance of knowing when to use CGI, when to use practical, and just knowing that horror fans typically prefer practical effects. But I was surprised. It's clearly there's a couple shots where they're using CGI, and I thought they did fine with those shots. They were good, a good display of gore, blood. But there's a lot of behind the scenes footage that's already out there. There's a lot of practical that kind of, I'm like, oh wow, I would have never guessed that they were able to do it in today's day and age. Again, it's something that you could tell that the people that went into the creation of this film, they know what people like, and they definitely honored it to the best of their capabilities. Practical effects in this movie, top notch, really good. You're gonna enjoy the kills, you're gonna enjoy the blood, the Deadites, all of that stuff. It looks great in this movie. Something unique to Evil Dead Rise is, I guess, the emphasis on characters, because other than we all love Ash Williams, and I think there's the other exception being the remake, because with that story that they were telling in that movie, they kind of had to have that emotional depth with the characters, with the route they were taking that movie in. With Rise, I felt like, because other than that, with 1, 2, and Army of Darkness, there's really only a few other kind of, cult favorite characters other than Ash. Characters really take a back seat in this franchise. You're there, to experience kind of just a bombastic, sometimes scary, sometimes pulpy horror movie. I think with this movie they have that, but they also have that emphasis on the characters. I think it has to do with the overarching theme of motherhood in this movie. I felt like the way they handled that kind of topic and that the subject matter, and just emphasizing that being a new parent, being a new mom, it's scary. I think it really adds to the stakes and kind of the tension building that goes with rooting for the protagonists of the movie. This is a pretty minor spoiler, but there was a scene with Alyssa Sutherland, and we'll talk about her shortly because she did phenomenal in this movie. But there was a scene where Alyssa Sutherland, who plays the Patient Zero Deadite, for lack of a better phrase, and she's staring at Beth, who is the protagonist of this movie. And before she kind of becomes, full-on Deadite, before the Evil Dead takes her over, she like stares in her eyes and is like, "Please don't let them hurt my babies." And when she says that, it's, stuff really hits the fan, and you're like, "Oh crap! Like this is gonna be a tense movie," and it is. And again, it's I think that emphasis on characters and rooting and for all the characters in the film, it really kind of helps it stick out from the other films in the franchise in a very good way. Again, going back to Alyssa Sutherland, she was a phenomenal Deadite. I just think the way that she moved, the way that she kind of expressed emotion with her face, it was bombastic and scary, and she just did an incredible job at performing as a Deadite. This movie, some of the things she says, like, it's a really, like, they emphasize the evil in Evil Dead, like, she says some dark stuff, and it gets really tense. One final thing I want to talk about with Evil Dead Rise is the Easter eggs in this movie. Easter eggs are never subtle, but I think with this movie there was a little bit of a subtlety to them. There was a bit of tastefulness to the Easter eggs in this movie. They weren't as, I've seen franchises that are way more in your face about them than how they handled them in this movie. Some of them are there and are very clearly paying homage to the earlier films, but it's something I can't quite put into words. It's something you just kind of have to watch. But the way they handle them, it's better than, like, again, and I love the David Gordon Green, the first two movies in the David Gordon Green trilogy. It's better than, like, the Halloween Kills when they had the Halloween 3 masks, because it felt like, oh, look, Halloween 3 masks. But where in this movie it was, they had, again, a ton of references to the older movies. There was, tastefulness to it, as tasteful as Evil Dead can get. But anyways, yeah, I'm giving Evil Dead really high 9 out of 10. Again, these movies, they don't miss. All of them are fantastic horror movies. There's nothing below a 9 for me in this franchise. Here's my ranking here. And technically, again, Evil Dead Rise at the moment might be last. It's still, the beyond 1 and 2, it's those last 3 movies are very marginal. They're all fantastic. I would definitely go check it out in theaters while it's still around. Anyways, thank you so much for sticking around. If you could like, comment, and subscribe, that would be fantastic, and I'll catch you boys next time.